Thank you very much, Richmond, for that introduction. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor and a very distinct pleasure to welcome you all to the first ever multi-logs of the Nigerian Gas Association as we take new strides towards driving gas utilization via the NGA's advocacy-led initiatives. Now, for those of us who might not be as familiar with the NGA, the Nigerian Gas Association is the apex organization that represents the varied and numerous stakeholders in the gas sector within Nigeria's gas industry. We are not for profit, we are non-governmental, we are a non-political association formed in 1999 to promote the advancement of Nigeria's natural gas as the preferred energy source, while still serving as the premier platform to champion the development in gas in Nigeria for the benefit of the nation and the various stakeholders in Nigeria's gas value chain. NGA is the largest gas-focused and individual member volunteer organization, the umbrella association and the voice of the gas industry in Nigeria, and we are a chartered member of the International Gas Union. Now, as the premier association in the industry, NGA is continuously and actively championing the competitiveness and utilization of natural gas by promoting sound policy articulation, capacity development, and of course, best practices that are targeted at optimizing the economics of the gas value chain. So we're looking at issues from transmission and distribution, utilization and power generation, commercial and industrial transportation issues, to of course the environmental, legal and fiscal aspects of the gas industry operations. And we're very intentional about creating platforms for the advancement of knowledge and learning through fit-for-purpose thoughts and capacity building trainings, such as these ones, for disseminating industry information to members and the broad public. Now, what we want to do at our core is to ensure that gas matters are properly addressed and that the understanding by the government and the public of gas and its impact on the economy and our people is enhanced. Indeed, this is the objective that underpins our gatherings over the next 2 days. As the NGA, we are very clear that Nigeria has the potential to be a gas superpower. We hold the largest gas reserves in Africa with approximately 203.16 TCF of proven gas reserves and another 600 TCF of unproven reserves. Now, we play significantly in the global gas market, specifically for LNG. And at this point, I want to stop and congratulate one of our sponsors, founding members, and a very dedicated partner to NGA, the Nigeria LNG, for the award given to them recently by the World LNG Association. Now, we want to look at the domestic front and see also that even within the country, gas is already being leveraged, albeit far below capacity, as an industrial fuel and feedstock. So we're using gas in country already for power generation and for other industrial processes. And these are through a range of fixed and virtual delivery solutions. So we have pipeline gas, LNG, compressed natural gas, some natural gas vehicles, and various LPG applications. Now, we as NGA, we recognize and we continue to advocate for a deepening of our domestic gas markets because we recognize that our true wealth as a nation doesn't lie in the abundance of the resource, but as in how extensively we're able to apply it towards various value-adding processes across different residential, commercial, industrial, petrochemical, agricultural, and other such sectors. So 2020 was declared as the year of gas by the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources, Chief Timi Silva. And the government then went on to back this declaration with a series of notable actions, amongst which are the launch and operationalization of the Nigerian Gas Transportation Network Code, the progression of the National Gas Flare Commercialization Program, the National Gas Expansion Program, and so on and so forth, the Gas Pricing Review Program that is going on, and the progression of some key infrastructure projects. Now, all these speak clearly to the efforts being made by the government to walk that talk of deepening natural gas penetration in the country. Although these are laudable, the Nigerian gas industry is still constrained in many ways, as we know, as much bedeviled by legacy issues as it is with new challenges that are evolving. So from commercial issues to infrastructure issues to issues around policy direction, formulation and implementation, to legislative issues and the lack of the clarity on the fiscal framework surrounding gas. And then, of course, compounding these issues are the broader macro challenges that we face and global challenges that have impacted on the gas industry in Nigeria. So from the twin shocks of the pandemic and the oil price crash to the economic recession that we are currently facing as a country, when we've really literally barely had time to catch our breaths from the last recession that we came out of. And of course, this is compounded by the growing distancing of global investment capital from hydrocarbon projects. Now, these all bring to the fore, once again, NGA's continued advocacy for the rapid acceleration of the pace and the scale of our national programs and interventions relating to gas, and the need to fashion out commercially attractive fiscal frameworks backed by appropriate legislations to ensure that we can literally begin to see the much needed investments and depth in our domestic gas markets, a situation which, if we can achieve, will significantly address many of the socioeconomic headwinds that we grapple with as a nation. So there are two critical levers on the table now. One is pricing and the other is legislation, by which I refer to the ongoing sector-wide gas pricing review effort by the Ministry of Petroleum Resources. And secondly, the progression of the almost 2 decades in the making petroleum industry bill, which is expected then to provide this much needed legislative backbone to investors in the gas industry, the kind of investors that as a nation we very much need to come to the fore to champion the development of gas production and the attendant value chain infrastructure projects. It is based on our appreciation of the criticality of these two bodies of work that we have curated the NGA 2020-2021 monologues, and this multilogues rather, a novel solution-driven series of stakeholder-led deep dives themed Achieving Consensus Pricing for the Natural Gas Value Chain in Nigeria for day one. And of course, tomorrow we'll be looking at the PIB dialogue, crystallizing sector legislation to spur wider development. And we have with us over the next couple of days a rich array of industry experts as speakers and panelists who are going to be sharing their insights and their expertise on these subjects, distilling the issues and proposing actionable strategies which, if we adopt, will enable us progress this rapid catalyzation of the attainment of Nigeria's economic recovery and growth agenda, leveraging on our gas resources. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, before I hand over to our eminent moderator and panelists, who are the ones really charged with the responsibility for doing the talking today, let me anchor my thoughts here at this time by commenting on the pronouncement by the Honorable Minister of State for Petroleum Resources of the Decade of Gas. This pronouncement is one that, as the NGA, we've advocated for a long time, and so we say a big kudos to our minister and his team for this pronouncement. We believe that the time is ripe, and that there are actually quick wins that can be attained as it relates to our national aspirations for energy access, availability, affordability, sustainability, as pertains to the acceleration of our non-oil revenue generation, the industrialization and economic recovery, generating employment, and so on. However, we recognize that the attainment of significant milestones within and at the end of this 10-year period is going to be a function of many things. It's going to be a function of consistency, a function of an unwavering focus, a sustaining of the momentum, irrespective of changes in leadership. It's going to be a function of partnerships and collaborations, and of course the stability of the operating environment, the regulatory and fiscal environments, amongst other factors. So as NGA, our commitment is that we will continue to foster the attainment of these as an association across our membership and in partnership with the government. And so we have a long way to go, and we know that we all have our parts to play. We actually see Nigeria as sitting very precariously on a tipping point, and we need to be sure that in partnership with the government and the private sector, we can place the weight on the right sides of imperatives to ensure we actually roll forward into an unprecedented level of economic recovery on the back of a gas revolution, rather than rolling the other way into further economic. So that said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you all once again, and I want to invite you to sit back and listen to the very broad and astute discussions that will begin shortly. I look forward to a robust question and answer session immediately after the presentations and the panel session. And it is my earnest wish that each of you who has taken the time out of your busy schedules to be here today is going to leave further enriched for having attended these sessions. So distinguished ladies and gentlemen, thank you all for listening, and I wish us all fruitful deliberations. God bless you all, and God bless our industry and our dear nation, Nigeria. Thank you very much. Richmond, over to you. Thank you. Speaking on behalf of Mr. Sangsa and of course our dear COO for his insights into this issue. Now, talking about pricing methodologies, I think that one thing we all agree on this panel is the fact that we have to get it right in terms of pricing to be able to enable gas development in the country, because this is the issue, that gas is an enabler of various sectors, and I spoke to that in my opening remarks. Now, when you look at Nigeria, as Oke pointed out, in terms of production and in terms of actual utilization of gas, we're actually, the Nigerian gas market is the least developed amongst peer nations, and this is something we also have to keep bringing to the fore. What we have seen globally is that countries and regions are literally moving away from the realm of regulated pricing into market-led pricing. So whether you look across Europe and North America, where the markets are fully, the gas markets are fully market-led, or you're looking closer to the Asia region from China, India, Malaysia, and the rest of them, you see that increasing push towards a deregulated market-led regime. But of course, in Nigeria, we haven't really seen that. And when you consider the fact that there is such a clear correlation between the pricing frameworks you use within your country, the depth and robustness of the domestic gas market, and of course the economic development, like Oke pointed out, the $1 to $3 correlation on the GDP side, it explains to some degree why we are where we are, and we have to be able to rethink that. So yes, like CEO pointed out, it's good to look at models and then try to contextualize it within your own peculiarities, and I think that is critical, and I know that's the kind of work that is being done. So when you think about Nigeria over the last 10, 12 years, 15 years, from the gas master plan even into today, we have to ask ourselves why we have not seen the kinds of supply side projects, the kind of midstream projects that would have enabled a broader gas supply in the country, and that would have taken care of a lot of the pricing conversations we're having today. And where we are now, we have to be able to do things very differently. So whatever pricing framework we come up with has to take this into cognizance. If we look at Egypt, for instance, and Egypt is a good example because they have gone through the same journey of regulated pricing and saw how that grossly constrained investments, and they had to do a quick turnaround. So you have a situation where in a very short timeline, within the same period that Nigeria was doing gas master planning and all that, we saw Egypt go into over 80 E&P agreements. In this time, we saw Egypt get the Zohr field, that's an offshore gas development project of over 30 trillion cubic feet in offshore, yes, about almost 1,500 meters of water. And within 3 years, they had delivered this project, less than 3 years. In this time, Nigeria has not been able to do the same thing. We don't have the infrastructure build out. And yes, the liquidity issues and all that continue to impact on the sector. I feel that price frameworks, yes, there's always the tension about what is the appropriate level of recovery and incentivization for the sellers, for the investors on one side, that will still ensure affordability for the buyers at the other side. But the economics have to be right for the investors. And then if we have more investors, we're able to then, over time, net off this issue of costing. So right now, we are the ones who are still telling ourselves the story about how great an investment landscape we are. The reality is that there are too many challenges within our environment that don't make for investors to be flowing into Nigeria, and we need to do a spin on this. So I think that in terms of looking at the pricing frameworks, we have to be looking at frameworks that ensure bankability, that ensure cost recovery, that ensure that the return on investment is commensurate with the risk, and then we have to look at things that ensure that we're not subsidizing one party at the expense of the other. So it has to be a value chain perspective. And I know that the committee has done extensive work around this because, as CEO pointed out, there has been a very extensive stakeholder engagement from the upstream all the way down to the user end. So what we expect that we have to be able to come up with a pricing framework that the market can bear, yes, but again, keeping in view, how do we deal with the issue of needing to incentivize investments in? And then again is why it's good to look at benchmarks. So just to wrap up quickly, I'll give the example of India, for instance, where India at some point, they had this subsidy regime in place, and for them it was about the build-up of their fertilizer sector. In Nigeria, we're looking at the power sector. So, but ultimately they had to walk back from that and rather channel the subsidies directly to the end user farmers. So these are some of the things we think that in looking at the pricing frameworks here, we should be asking ourselves in Nigeria, where do we want to channel incentives? You know, do we want to just keep hitting on the supply side when we need more people to come into the supply side, when we need to build up a more robust midstream infrastructure to ensure we can get gas delivery all over the country and not where we have gas prevalently in certain parts of the country? And then how do we do this using gas as an enabler to then incentivize the right side of the value chain rather than impacting on the on the investor side. So I just think that, you know, we must be sure that we have a long-term view. For where Nigeria is currently, gas will help to get us out of a lot of the problems we are facing, but only if we can bring more gas to the fore. So whatever price framework we'll be looking at, again, we encourage this rapid move towards the willing buyer, willing seller. Yes, we know that there are concerns and constraints around that. That said, it's the only way to go if we are to be able to really, you know, see the acceleration and deepening of our domestic gas market. So I'm going to leave that as my early comments for now, and then I'm sure that in the course of the subsequent discussions, we can do a deeper dive into some of the issues that I've raised. Thank you, Olu. All right, thank you, Olu. Let me connect my response to a bit of what the CEO said. He was talking about around the issue of export parity. Now, our reality is that when we look at the export-oriented gas, and you've talked about, you know, what the dynamics around that are, it is a very different narrative when you are talking about the supply into the domestic market. There are so many add-on costs, and I think it's always important, especially when we have a mixed audience, for them to be able to understand this, that it's not just some people sitting down and ascribing cost of gas, you know, just out of the blues, but that there are real costs that are attached. So there are costs of processing. Yes, we know that because you're talking about the difference in specs between export gas and the DOM gas requirements. So there's stripping and processing that is involved in that. There are add-on costs based on the multiplicity of agencies that you have to get permits from on any single project, each of which adds on to your cost profiles. There are issues around the cost of your infrastructure itself. Dollar denominated, we have to import every single thing, and of course we all know what the concerns are, the constraints are around accessibility of access to forex, as well as the differential rates between, you know, the currency of your investment as well as the currency of your returns, and there's value erosion off the top from that. We know that there are big issues around security of assets. Mr. Motoyinbo, when he was talking, he also referred to the issues around the GSAs, so that even around bankability, securitization, there's so many things that just create a more significant risk profile and very direct add-on cost to bringing in gas into the domestic market, and sustainably so. And the only way we address this is to be able to deal with some of the legacy issues, and then of course bring more people on board. When we talk about export gas, we're talking mostly around the NLNG. The domestic players do not have the kinds of incentives that enabled an NLNG to succeed. And if those kinds of incentives are thrown at the domestic market, I promise you, you will see a lot of people coming in, and we might not have to be discussing pricing. So it's always good to put this comparison very clearly in place so that a non-industry player understands exactly what we're talking about. And still to appreciate all the work that is being done, but I just thought to bring that into context. Because when you're now speaking also about how are we partnering with the government in terms of this issue of funding. So yes, as NGA, we are an integral part of the work that COO, as the chair of that sector-wide gas pricing review framework, that is ongoing. We're part of that committee. We've made our submissions. We engaged consultants across board from our members internationally, did a lot of country comparison, and we've been in a lot of meetings, and the CEO alluded to that. He's given us the privilege of his time more than once to sit down and trouble the assumptions and giving a sense of direction, listen to our inputs and taking that on board. So for NGA, is that high level engagement we're doing. But even as members, as you know, NGA is a volunteer organization. Our members themselves independently are in these conversations directly with prospective financiers, because these are the realities we face. Many of us have projects that are hanging because investors are saying no, our entire countries are saying no, we don't want to be doing any kind of hydrocarbon investments anymore, and we're having to deal with those narratives. So as NGA, what we do also is to make sure we're very visible. We're in different fora, all sorts of webinars, events, conferences. We would have been at the International Gas, the World Gas Conference. They were scheduled to hold in June this year, but they've just had to postpone it again to 2023 because of the COVID issues, 2022. And at such places, what we do is to actually set up a Nigeria pavilion where we bring on our members and we engage robustly with the different gas associations, with the different people that come on board to speak to the opportunities that exist in Nigeria and why it's important for them to recognize that for Nigeria, gas is our transition fuel. And so there's no need to be saying there's no need for investing in gas in Nigeria. When you're talking clean energy for Nigeria, for the Africa continent, gas is the resource that makes sense for today. And so we're constantly pushing this narrative forward. The government is doing its bit, but we also know that because we're privileged to be in direct conversations with many of those global investors, then we are also pushing that narrative as widely as is possible. And I'll anchor it there for now. Thanks, Olu. All right, thank you, Emeka. And again, a very good morning to all the distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. So NGA thought that this topic is really critical to the narrative of Nigeria at this point in time. And of course, we've heard it said endlessly, we're facing several headwinds. We're also facing a recession at this point. And as I said yesterday, that we have barely had time to come out of the last recession, but we're seeing a situation where our GDP is at a level that is the lowest it has been in 30%. And on the other side, of course, the population statistics, we're still seeing the numbers growing. We're still seeing the unemployment trend getting worse. And the conversation around the impact of the oil and gas sector as an enabler, especially our gas sector as an enabler, is why the narrative of gas development continues to come to the fore. So when we look at the PIB, we've been on this journey now for almost 20 years. As Adeo said that he used to have hair and not gray hair for that matter. So we know that when we look at the level of development, we have not done the best that we could have done. If you take a Ghana, for instance, we know that Ghana passed their own PIB within 5 years. And you begin to ask why we should have then taken this amount of time. So the PIB is literally the single most important piece of legislative instrument since the Petroleum Act. And we recognize this, yet we have not fast-tracked it. And so we've continued to struggle as a nation, even though we have all these lofty aspirations around lifting 100 million people out of poverty, ensuring energy sufficiency, industrialization, and all that. Those things don't just come by making the pronouncements. Now, what I find interesting is that we know that, if we look over the past 2 decades, practically, especially in the last 10, we have seen encapsulated in the policy pronouncements the direction that goes in terms of optimizing oil and gas. So whether it was the 7 big wins, whether it was the economic recovery and growth plans, whether it's the national gas policy, even that clearly articulates the intention to move us away from an oil export-based economy to a gas-based industrialized nation. Why have we not progressed this? And at this point in time that we're looking at the PIB 2020, we have to be sure that we get the right sets of inputs that will incentivize investments. So we can't get away from this narrative around investments, both locally and more importantly, externally, because of that competition as everyone has alluded to, in terms of the available resources, in terms of the push towards renewable. And I think another underlying factor is the economic environment, that we don't have the most secure, safe, or sustainable of industrial environments. The frameworks are not clear. So we need this legislation to come to the fore, yes, but it has to come to the fore in a way that makes sense. Now, there are some things within the policy, and I think that in the main discussion, we'll get into that, inside the draft rather, that seem to go against the tenets of even the national gas policy. And we've heard it from the upstream part, the midstream, the downstream. We should be talking about enablers, we should be talking about incentivization, but it's not clear that that is exactly what we're seeing. So there's a lot of engagement that is happening. I know that that's the closing remarks that Audrey put forward in terms of engagement. So even as the NGA, I've been on NGA Council for over 14 years, and in every council, maybe save one, when there was quiet around the PIB, we were in discussions around with the National Assembly, with different elements of government, trying to push for the promulgation of this bill. At this point in time, we're still in those sets of engagements. We're working with OPTS, with IPPG, with even the LPG Association. We're collaborating, we're working with the National Assembly, with the Technical Advisory Committee, and so on, just to make sure that this time around, we can get a workable bill passed. And that, for me, is the qualifier. That is not just about passing the PIB anymore, it's about passing a workable bill that will enable the upstream, midstream, and downstream petroleum sector to thrive, and then leverage on that to enable other sectors of the economy. So I'm going to leave it at that, just for opening remarks, and as we get into the Q&A, I'm sure we can do a further deep dive into some of the more specific areas. Emeka, thank you very much. So many things that need to be happening at the same time, and the PIB is not a 100% fix for the challenges we face in the gas sector. And in my opening comments, I did allude to some of the legacy issues. But if we even look at within the PIB, for instance, so if we're now talking about the authority and the commission, when we're looking at the enabling of investments, part of the constraints we face, for instance, around this multiplicity of agencies, you have to deal with so many regulators and all that. So I personally feel that if you even look at just the formation proposed for the commission and the authority, then it makes sense in looking at it as the streamlining of some. So you're no more dealing with DPR, PPPRA, PEF, and all that. You're now dealing with two bodies. And the way to make that work is that there must be an efficiency around the amalgamation of those bodies, one. Secondly, and Bolaji alluded to this in terms of performance management. So the concern when you look at the PIB in terms of the employees of these organizations that are going to be moved into these new regulatory bodies that are being formed, are we taking everybody, or are we taking the best people? Right? So who are those that are going to be working? What kind of alignment? And I want to use an analogy. For instance, if it's a bank that is merging with another bank, you know how difficult those things are. So what we don't want is a situation where in creating these two commissions, we actually introduce a different kind of complexity into the regulatory space for the industry. It's going to be about the efficiencies there, and also making sure that we knock off, in so doing, some of those rent-seeking avenues that we see when we're dealing with too many regulators at the same time. Now, of course, pricing is an issue in terms of enabling the gas investments, and we've talked about this. So yes, within the PIB, we saw that there was that provisioning for pricing, which was a huge concern. As NGA, we've pushed back to say, certainly that cannot be the case. We need to take that out completely. Once you legislate prices, you have already created a problem, right? So that's another thing. So we expect then that outside of the PIB, the work that is being done, and those were some of the issues we discussed yesterday, to put a pricing framework that is more market-led, that is moving away from regulation, allowing competition to thrive, then we can see more projects coming to the fore. It's very important also to note that the power sector is one of the biggest challenges we have, even on the gas side, because of the huge exposure that we have in terms of the volumes. And so one of the key things that as a nation we should be looking at is how to create other offtake markets that then reduce that overarching dependency we have on the power sector for volumes, such that when there are challenges in the power sector, as is the current case, the gas sector is not that badly impacted. So we have to be thinking about the incentivization all across board from the investment point of view. And this is the thing then. So when you look at the PIB, for instance, the tax regime, yes, we say that it looks like the taxes are lower, but we know that we still have the gas side of the business being taxed on CIT at 30%. When we're talking about building a vibrant gas sector, when we're talking about leveraging on our gas resources to enable other sectors of economy, actually would have expected some more incentivization around gas. That would have made sense. All right, in my view, I think it would have made sense for us to look at what else can we give. And yesterday we talked about how if we all have the same kind of incentives around the NLNG model, for instance, you would have seen more investments coming to the fore. We've talked about sanctity of contracts, right? That being an issue that we still hope that in the process of transitioning to the PIB will be dealt with. So there are issues around the migration of contracts, the grandfathering arrangements and so on, and the concerns that some of the clauses that are proposed within the PIB, it's almost as if you are being penalized for an existing framework. So that doesn't quite give the sense of comfort to investors, especially when you're looking at it from a long-term play. Already we have existing frameworks that were planned for 20, 30 years ahead, and now we're shifting the goalpost, so to speak. That's not a bad problem because we're trying to restructure the industry, but making room for those transition periods that recognize that there is an unbundling that needs to happen of existing contracts into the newer ones. Now, I think also it's important to pick on a point Oke had raised in his opening presentation, and this was around the regulatory alignment. He was talking about administrative complexities that come, especially because you now have you have a lot of integrated projects within the gas industry, but we're now looking at two different commissions that will be regulating upstream and then midstream and downstream. We have to be able to fine-tune that. It's going to take us a while, even though it's the thrust of the gas policy, it's going to take us a while to get to that, actual unbundling and disaggregation of the value chain in real terms. Right? I think that's a process that, again, a transitional framework has to be looked at. And maybe lastly, at this point in time, if I want to talk about how we can enable, and I'm looking at it from the assumption that by January, February, March, we're going to have a working PIB, because the way the National Assembly is moving, I know that stakeholder engagement should be happening early in the new year, and then we should get, all being well, presidential assent by end of Q1. So if we now look at it from that perspective of what are the things that need to happen very quickly? We know that even the issue around NMPC Limited can grossly impact on your investments, because about the signaling to existing investors as well as to prospective investors. And this is something we need to be continuously mindful of. What is it that we're signaling? Yes, we want to move ahead with this PIB, but in this period where we still have some room to negotiate, do stakeholder engagements, I think the language has to be incentivization, incentivization, incentivization. Oke talked about government take and how we should reduce that. And I think it's important to put that out there, that we have to create a better return for prospective investors. We cannot pull capital back, right, unless it can see that it's going to attract a lot of returns, especially in the climate that we're in today. So government has to be able to take a longer term view of saying, you know what, in the short term, we will do a lower take, so that it is the investors who are putting their money on the ground, who are the ones that are having to deal with the industry risks and all that are getting the higher portion of the take. And that's where we bring more people to the table. You see more projects, and the multiplier benefits are then, something that everybody can enjoy, and the government themselves benefit from that. Of course, also taking into cognizance that there are socio-economic benefits that go with all, the enabling of different types of projects within and outside of the gas sector. So I'm going to anchor my comments around that to say, look, there are too many things. We cannot just think that the PIB is the one-stop solution. It is imperative to have it in place, but we must have the discipline to address some of the other structural and systemic challenges we've been talking about in the gas sector for so long now. Right? Thanks, Emeka. Right. My comment would be that It is supposed to be an opportunity. Very simple. So that we just tell ourselves the truth. We are not ready to take advantage of that. We need to deal with many issues internally before we can take advantage of after. And that's the reality. So I think it's an opportunity that exists and we should be mindful of. But I think that we should literally pay a lot of attention to resolving the issues we have in country, building additional capacity to enable us to be competitive across the continent. I'll keep it at that. I hope that was 10 seconds. Emeka, if we would face our realities, and I like to be very realistic, we are just not in the most advantageous of positions when you look at the manufacturing space, when you look at our industrial sector. So from a competitiveness index, we are very low. And there's nothing you're going to do overnight. That's the truth. So even if we can identify some quick wins now, they're still going to take some time to unfold. So Q1 there's nothing changing by Q1. This is our reality. And this is the problem of not addressing issues head on in a timely and efficient manner. So many things, I mean, it's literally like the last 20 years are crashing around us now. That's our reality. So there are no quick fixes and we have to be ready to deal with that. I saw something, I think there's a question in the chat box, in the Q&A box, and it was asking around the switching costs for the autogas project. You know what, Bolaji, I don't remember where you and I, maybe 15 years, 16 years ago in Abuja, we had a conversation around autogas and the conversion kits. At that point in time, what was the dollar rate? Our economy was in a stronger place. If we had done some of the things that we're discussing doing now in terms of enabling autogas, we would have not been having the same conversation today. So this is our reality. A lot of the economic fundamentals are in a bad place. Let's not expect overnight success. Nothing can happen in Q1. However, does that mean we should sit back and do nothing? No. But then again, it's about taking the bull by the horn and addressing the issues that need to be addressed. And whether we like it or not, again, the narrative around gas. Gas is what is going to take us out of this challenge. So are we getting gas right? Are we getting it right? The answer is no. We are still looking at it as if just by making pronouncements, there will be a turnaround. That's not it. When Taj was talking, he said you can't compel investments. You can't. You attract it. This is the reality. Do we realize that there are Nigerians who are literally taking their money to invest outside the country because it makes sense? So, I mean, just so I don't go on, I'm very passionate about this issue of turning the country around, but there will be no quick fixes. We have to do the hard work. We need to be ready to take the knocks. So the person asking about how come it costs 200,000 for a conversion kit is the same way we as the investors are saying, do you realize the costs we deal with? Everything is important. We have so many overheads, locally and internationally. We have so many taxes, so many levies, so many issues, and all of them add on to the cost. And then we're saying that we then need to have prices that help us to make sense of these investments, and everybody's up in arms about pricing. These are the issues. These are the issues. So let's just know that there is room. It's an opportunity for us. We will walk into it, but we're going to be playing catch up. That's our truth. However, I know that if you do the right sets of things, your catch up may be for a period, but there is still potential to accelerate and excel, even beyond those who were, first mover advantages usually last only so long. A small player can come from the back and go past you very quickly. If they have the right sets of strategies, they are focused and determined to do that. And that's what Nigeria needs to be doing right now.